most entrepreneurs are type A personalities. They're driven people. And if there's, and I experienced this myself after we sold our business, if when you wake up in the morning, there's not something driving you and not something purposeful in your life, it's really, really unsettling. And we've watched that with our entrepreneurs as well, is you've got to be super thoughtful about what comes next and why is that important in your life. One of the questions we always ask our clients is, what's a sale of your business going to be possible that's not possible today?
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I am your host, Bob Mastroianni, and today I have with me Chris Younger. Chris is the CEO and founder of Class 6 Partners. Chris co-founded Class 6 in 2005 with a mission to empower the entrepreneurial spirit, sharing a passion for what entrepreneurs mean to our community. Chris felt that Class 6 could do a better job for business owners by integrating personal and business planning and by taking a holistic view of the entrepreneur's journey. Wow, Chris, I'd love to dig much deeper into that. So let's talk just a little bit. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Bob. Thanks for doing what you're doing for entrepreneurs out there.
Excellent. Excellent. So tell me a little bit about your story. I mean, what brought you to Class 6? I'm sure there were some things along your path that brought you to this point. So maybe you can kind of back up a little bit and tell me how you got to this place.
Yeah, for sure. We started the firm back 2005. I started with my partner, David Tolson. And I had, prior to that, had helped found and was initially the deal guy in doing a roll up in the communication space. We built what ultimately became the largest value added reseller of communications equipment to small, medium-sized businesses. And I did a bunch of acquisitions and then ultimately became the COO and the president of that business. We built it up. We got to maybe $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion in sales. And then we sold it to Avaya, which was our major vendor, and tried to retire. That didn't work out too well. I was definitely too young. And I like to joke, I was reorganizing Mary Beth's, she's my wife of 30 years, her spice drawer. And I won't use exactly the language she used, but she said, you need to go find a hobby. And I said, fair enough. I want to stay married. And I'd gotten a chance to meet David. And so we started the firm. And we really started it just because number one, we love doing deals, which is fun. But more importantly, we loved working with entrepreneurs. They are some of the kind of most interesting, talented, smart, driven, persistent, fun to hang out with people that I know. And I'm very, very fortunate in that every day I get to work with them. And it's just been it's a blast. We've got an unbelievable team at Class 6 that makes me and David and our leadership team look better than we are. And we get to work with some of the greatest people on earth, which is a lot of fun.
So what is your main value add that you're adding for entrepreneurs? What is your main business value add?
Yeah, if you think about the journey of an entrepreneur, ultimately, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's going to involve some kind of transition from the business. And oftentimes that's a sale of the business. And our goal is really, how do we make that sale as rewarding, both financially and, kind of spiritually to that entrepreneur as possible? How do we find the right home for their business? How do we get them a fantastic deal? Because it's not only important for them to get rewarded for all the time and money and energy that they've put into their business, but I think as a community, we need them to be successful because we want other entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs to feel like, hey, it's worth taking all that risk and putting all that time and managing all that stress to go build a business. I live in Colorado, and look, our client base, or the types of businesses that would fit into our client base, they're the ones doing most of the hiring. They're the ones, really responsible for most of the economic growth. And one of the things that we've learned, and one of the stats that we're most proud of, is they're also some of the most generous people in our community. We did an informal tally, and we have our client base has given what we estimate to be over $200 million back to the community in some form or fashion. And that's pretty cool. And I don't know that entrepreneurs, frankly, get enough credit for that. And so, again, our mission, right, back to empowering the entrepreneurial spirit, is, hey, how can we give them the best advice as they are starting down this path? So we typically will start with an entrepreneur maybe 2 or 3 years before they're going to sell a company, and work with them to really optimize value creation in their business. And then our investment bank will manage that transaction for them. And then we have a family office that manages their money. What we've learned is, by incorporating kind of both the personal and the professional planning together, we can deliver a much better result. So it's, like I said, it's a lot of fun. We get to work with awesome people, and we get to work with them and their families long term.
Very cool. Before we came on, I was going over some of your information, and I mentioned the business name is Class 6. And, you said something very interesting to me. You said that the business was named after the most difficult rapids, because those are the ones that you need a guide through. And as you're talking about your story, and you're talking about the value add that your business provides for entrepreneurs, it all makes sense to me right now, right? You are, I mean, that is really, from when we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, I think we often talk about the creative, the making the business happen, the getting it off the ground, the thinking of the ideas, and that's all on the front end. And I think we don't think about the back end, although the goal is often, I want to create this business because I want to eventually sell it or eventually move on to the next thing. But you're providing value and helping them on that portion of the business, which I would guess that for many entrepreneurs, that's not necessarily the most exciting part, right? They generally love the creating the business idea. That's where they, and maybe even, and you can go into this if you'd like, but maybe even the excitement of, what am I going to build next, right, now that I'm leaving this? So
Yeah, it's a really, really important conversation to have with entrepreneurs, because if what we've learned, and doing this over 100 times, if the entrepreneur is not running to something, and again, that could be spending time with their family, de-stressing, uh, getting a more diversified personal balance sheet, maybe their next startup. If they're not running to something, but they're only running from something, right? That, hey, they just need to get out of this business because it's killing them. That's generally not a great recipe for them.
hmm,
It's a lot better if they've got, most entrepreneurs are type A personalities. They're driven people. And if there's, and I experienced this myself after we sold our business, if when you wake up in the morning, there's not something driving you, and there's not something purposeful in your life, it's really, really unsettling.
hmm,
And we've watched that with our entrepreneurs as well. Is you've got to be super thoughtful about what comes next, and why is that important in your life. One of the questions we always ask our clients is, what's a sale of your business going to be possible that's not possible today?
hmm,
And hopefully that helps them distill, because of, the transaction is a blunt instrument. I mean, it's stressful, it's time consuming, it's expensive. And if you're not thoughtful about it, that you could end up wasting a lot of time and energy, without that true North Star of what you're really trying to accomplish. And the class 6 metaphor is, we've been down the journey, down those rapids, a couple hundred times, and so we know how dangerous they are. And so it's really, hey, when our entrepreneur client gets in the canoe, or the kayak, hey, can we sit alongside them and guide them so that they can get through them safely, and not have a problem.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two aspects to that, right? The first aspect is that, I've heard many entrepreneurs say that, you know, when they're selling an opportunity, they're selling a business. Oftentimes they look at that business and it has a valuation, and really that's just a number on a piece of paper. But when that sale goes through, then all of a sudden there's a really big dollar value that they now have. And it's like, what am I going to do with this money? Right? Where
Oh,
am I going to
sure.
place this money? How am I going to handle this money? It's not always, I remember seeing an interview with Tom Bilyeu, and when he had sold his health bar business, he was like, there was like a significant 9-figure number in my bank account, and I had never really seen that before. And then it was like, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to make a difference? And how am I
Oh,
going
yeah.
to keep myself inspired to keep moving? Right.
Well, the nice thing about entrepreneurs is they're very creative.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, a lot of our clients are just very charitably driven. And the number of cool ideas that we have seen them finance and help, it's awesome to watch. And we've gotten exposed to hundreds and hundreds of charities through our clients that we in turn make donations to. And it's just, I think, uh, at their core, I think most high quality entrepreneurs, I think they understand the role of fortuity in business and the role of luck.
Hmm.
And I think most of them count themselves really, really fortunate. Hey, I was at some level, I was there at the right time with the right strategy and it worked out, or I got this big customer at the right time. And I think most of them feel this need to give back and to pay it forward and or to help other entrepreneurs. Maybe that's investing or giving them advice. I know with our clients, anytime we call them and ask if they could help one of our other clients, it's absolutely let me know where and when, and I'm happy to help. And it's inspiring and humbling and fun all at once to watch them really find their groove and be back into that giving role. Because I do think, look, successful entrepreneurs, it's all about how am I serving or producing something that's of value to somebody else.
Yeah,
And in their first life, they got paid for it. In their second life, maybe they're paying to do that, but
sure.
all it's still around service to others.
Well, I love that even from the beginning, you started to speak about the generosity of the entrepreneurs in your local region, and doing what I'm doing here between the podcast and I'm involved in real estate investment communities, and I meet many people who have had a solid amount of success entrepreneurially, and the give back portion of it is never left out. It's a conversation that comes up every time. Where do I give back? How can I give back? How can I help others? And it's been a very interesting thing for me in these conversations. And I think it's interesting, sometimes we see a certain headline that it looks good to say, like, mean old rich person or something like that. But I found the exact opposite to be true. And I've found that exactly what you're saying. Most people who have, especially those who have created something in order to see their success, know that somewhere along the line, someone gave to them, or many people gave to them and helped them along their journey. And that's just it's just deep inside them to try and provide value back for others. And sometimes that's from financial investment, or giving back of conversation and mentorship, and anything that they can do. So I'm so glad that you sort of went down that road right away there. So
Well, it's when we explain our why to our team, uh, look, it's not that motivating to just help somebody get rich, right? It's fine. It's fun. Doing transactions, don't get me wrong. There's a certain amount of adrenaline with that. But that's not why we do it, right? We're doing it because number one, we respect and regard what that entrepreneur has done. And hopefully they can be a role model for other entrepreneurs. But it's also for that very reason is that we found them to be just incredibly generous people. I've got a good friend, and he's a little bit older than I am. His name's John Kelly, who is here in Colorado. And he's been just a role model for me in terms of giving back. John has had unbelievable success across a number of different businesses, but there literally isn't a charity that has called him that he said go to.
Hmm.
And he's on a number of different boards, and he's still running a company. So it's people like that when you look at and say, that uh, that's truly what it's all about. And I think when we're all looking at our last minutes on earth, we probably are not thinking about what's in the bank account. We're probably thinking about obviously friends and family, and hey, whose lives do we make an impact on?
Yeah, that's great. So I want to transition over a little bit to, we call this the Healthy Investor Podcast. And, I like to talk to entrepreneurs and success-minded individuals like yourself about what their healthy habits and routines are and how that affects their life. And before we jumped on, I'd mentioned that to you and your face lit up. So we didn't deep dive. I don't know the answer, but I'm really excited to hear what that means in your life, because I just knew right away that you have some sort of habits and routines that play an integral role in your day. So I'd like to learn about it.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about this. This is actually the first podcast that I've done where we go into this topic, and I'm really grateful because uh, I think too few, right, entrepreneurs and folks that are in the work world um, pay attention to this, because it is, as I tell the folks that work with me and certainly my kids, look, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And in order to kind of maintain your pace, you got to be paying attention to things. I'll give you a good example. When I was running the communications company, um, uh, I was traveling all the time. We had a couple young kids at home. I was on the road. You don't eat that well. Certainly wasn't exercising. And my wife kept saying, you really ought to go in and get a physical. And I didn't do it. I was still working, working, working. And finally, after we sold the company, I went in for the physical, and you kind of had the result that you might expect. Say, hey, you're probably 20 pounds overweight. Your cholesterol's high. Your blood pressure's high. Here are all your prescriptions. And this is my first experience with this. I said, so how long do these last? A couple of weeks? And he said, no, these are lifetime. I said,
Yeah.
that is not going to happen. And so I said, can you give me 6 months and completely change the diet? I'm predominantly vegetarian. I eat some fish. So I completely changed the diet. Like you, I started doing triathlons. Probably overdid it a little bit. Um, and that was really my kind of the start of my journey. And I think what I learned was the time that I was investing in just making sure I felt good. Uh, the return on that was, much more significant than, hey, if I'd spent another couple hours at the office. And so today, and my wife thinks I'm a little nutty, but still eat a really, really healthy, clean diet. Um, I've got my Aura ring on so I can see how my sleeping's going.
Nice.
Pay a lot of attention to that. I try to exercise, 7 days a week. Whether that's weightlifting or running or cycling. I do a lot of mountain biking here in Colorado. Um, and then I try really hard. I mean, I do some meditation. I journal quite a bit just to try to get thoughts down on paper. I have found that, and I'm sure there's some great philosophical quote on this, but most of the bad stuff in our life that we've imagined just never happens. And so just being able to articulate some of those things and be thoughtful around it when I write is really helpful. So yeah, uh, I'm there's a couple of great podcasts out there, Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia. There's some great podcasts just on, hey, how do you try to optimize your health?
Yeah.
And certainly as I've gotten older, I'm 56, and it's become a lot more important to take good care of the body because I'm things are getting a little more sore these days. So
Well, it's the only one you have, right?
yeah, exactly. So I've got a great physical therapist, and uh, I think I've got every device known to known to us that, whether it's the massage gun or the electrodes to stimulate your muscle, all that stuff, right, to try to alleviate some of the pain. But it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, you triggered a couple thoughts for me. One is, I you brought me back to something that I probably don't think I ever mentioned on my podcast before, which is that before I started to become healthy, I had some cholesterol and triglyceride issues, and I was in my mid 30s. And the very first response was to put me on medicine that
Oh,
I reacted to. So the medicine had high portions of niacin in it.
no, yeah.
And so I would be in a meeting and I would be bright red and itchy, and it would, like, I would start flushing, and it was like, okay, how long do I have to take this? Similar to what you were saying, right? Okay, is this a temporary thing, or is this going to be for the rest of my life? Because I can't do this for the rest of my
No
life.
way.
And some of the right changes, some of the exercising, some healthier habits, removing certain things from my life, right? Maybe less beer, pizza, and wings, and a little
For
more water
sure.
throughout the day, and
Yeah.
those sort of things. And now I guess it's probably been about 7 or 8 years that I've been off of that. And I actually sort of forgot about it. And then you brought up the pills, and I was like, oh yes, that actually was a portion of the push for me to say, I don't want to do this anymore. That's definitely something I don't want
Oh,
to do for the rest of my life.
well, and unfortunately, uh, I think Peter Attia was referring to medicine 2.0 versus medicine 3.0. And medicine 2.0 is basically, hey, tell me all your symptoms and I'll get you on this drug regimen. It's almost, a lot of our healthcare system reaction is, hey, we're just going to treat the symptoms versus, and maybe it's because, hey, a lot of people just don't have the desire to make those, more fundamental changes in your life. And maybe the doctors just get, here's your solution. But, the side effects, as you've experienced, I experienced, it's just, oh, I would much rather, go run and feel that runner's high afterward. And because it's just, I wish I could describe to people just how good you feel after you get a, good round of exercise in. And,
Yeah. I'm
uh,
I'm also not great, and I'll openly admit this. I'm also not great at being regular about taking medicine. So,
oh, yeah, for sure. For
and
sure.
when it
Yeah.
causes a reaction that doesn't feel so great, then I'm not all that
Yeah.
inspired to take it again tomorrow. So,
For sure, for sure. No, I've a good friend of mine just started doing I think it was statins and, the muscle aches and other side effects that he's had to deal with. And, so again, I know there's a place for all those things, but,
sure.
to the extent that we can, eliminate them through good habits, I think we ought to. At least that's my
Yeah.
my
And
personal
and I
opinion.
sort of thought in the beginning that at the very least, if I could get to a lower dosage, right? That was
Oh,
sort of the plan. Like, okay, if I can get to a lower dosage, it probably won't bother me as much. And
yep.
uh, and
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and now I'm just in a sort of better position overall. So you had mentioned that you compete in triathlons. What does that look like for
Well,
you? What?
I haven't competed. I did, like a lot of things in life, right? You kind of you get pretty overzealous. And so I did a bunch of triathlons. I don't know how many I've done, but did an Ironman in Florida and then one in Coeur d'Alene and one in Wisconsin. Uh, and then I think I ultimately concluded those are great. The amount of time I was spending training was pretty excessive. And so I scaled it back. And today I haven't done any racing in a while, but I mean, like I said, I mountain bike a lot. For me, it's kind of spiritual to get outside and be in nature. And
Mhm.
I ride up in the mountains here in Colorado, and I can ride and not see anybody for 2 hours, which is just, I mean, that's as good as it gets. I've always said, if you kind of want to experience um, the best of Colorado, go mountain bike in the fall through the aspens. There's just literally nothing better. And so I do a lot of that and still run and still, like I said, probably do more strength training than I did before as I've gotten older. But we're getting ready to install a pool that I can swim against.
Oh, nice.
that
Oh, one of those
yeah,
endless
that
pools.
yeah, I think it's called Swimex, and going to put one of those in because again, as the joints start to break down a little bit, that's a little bit easier. So
Yeah. I didn't realize that I would enjoy swimming as much as I do when I started.
for sure,
You know, as a kid, I would go to pools and sort of knew how to quote unquote swim, but I was never on a swim team. I never took the type of lessons where you would swim laps and all of that. And it took me probably, I started when I was 40. And so it took me probably a good 2 years before I really figured out what was comfortable for me as far as breathing is concerned.
yep,
And then that's when I was really able to lock in. And what's funny is I belong to a triathlon group, and we get together a lot in the summertime. And we were doing a pool swim, I guess about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was during COVID and some things were turned down, but we
right.
were there anyway. But one of the trainers noticed that I still hadn't fully figured my breathing out. And he said, "Bob, do you stop breathing between steps when you're running?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Then why do you think you're supposed to stop when you're swimming?" And I said, "Because my
Right.
face is in the water." And he sort of helped me with, you know, inhale, exhale underwater.
Exhale.
And it
Yeah.
took me a little bit to get used to. I mean, that's not the most natural thing in the world, I would say. But then once I did, I think now all of a sudden it went from swimming was the struggle for me. Biking was natural because everyone knows how to ride a bike from a kid, right? And running. Um, and those two were sort of the two that I could lock in the mental portion of it too, of like, I can enjoy this, whereas swimming was a little bit more stressful. And I feel like once I learned how to regulate my breathing properly, then I could really lock into that enjoyment of it versus just trying to live through it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, my wife joined me on the last two Ironman races, and she didn't know how to swim until she
Mm,
was 40, and just and she learned that doing triathlon, which, as you well know, those mass starts are quite challenging and a
yes.
little scary. But I agree with you. I think the feeling you get after swimming, it's just, it's a little bit of euphoria. It feels really, really good. And, but it does, I think swimming's one of those, you have to try less, it's almost you want to relax your way into the right stroke and, right body position and all that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the way triathlons start, with the way those swims start. Anyone who ever tells you that triathlon is not a contact sport has
Oh
never been
yeah.
has never been in the triathlon.
I got a funny story so I'd done these three Ironman races, so I thought I was really good. And there was a sprint triathlon up in Boulder, Colorado. And so on all the Ironman races, I started at the far right. I would basically just try to steer clear of most of the people, and I knew I wasn't going to be. But this one, for some reason, I thought, well, I'm going to try to get out in front.
Hmm.
And I was in front for probably 25 yards, and then just proceeded to get the snot kicked out of me by all all of these huge swimmers that just went right over top of me. I'm like, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah, I do
But it was
mostly sprint and Olympic right now. I haven't worked my
yep.
way up to the Ironman, although it's on the table as consideration, at least maybe a 70.3.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, it's a lot of training. That's the
yeah.
downside. It's just a lot of time. You spend, I mean, this is our kids were young and we used to hire a babysitter. So Meredith and I could go do a 7 hour ride. We'd start at 4 a.m. on a Saturday and have a babysitter come over. It's kind of crazy when you think back on it.
Yeah, and that's actually the portion that has been the biggest reason I've been tentative. I have a daughter who's 12 years
Oh,
old. I have a family.
oh yeah.
We do a lot of things together that we really enjoy. And I just did a half marathon a few weeks back. I'm not worried about the half marathon on the end of it. I know I could, I know I can do the 1.2 mile swim in the beginning. I've done mile distance swimming, but I have not prepared or even tried to attempt a 50 plus mile bike ride. And
Yep.
every one of those, plan your first, even, half Ironman schedules that I look at, it's like, okay, 5 hours on the bike today or 4 hours on the bike today. And I'm like,
Yep.
I have two choices. I either wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and go get on the trainer for 4 hours, or just spend a lot of time away from my family. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to commit to that just yet.
Yeah, I don't think either one of those is worth the trade. So
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, that's great. And you had mentioned that meditation is part of your schedule. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's usually in the mornings right when I wake up, 10 or 15 minutes. And I have found that, at least for me, it just helps kind of get me centered and um kind of a great start to the day. And so it's I would tell you, I don't think I'm a very good meditator. I My brain tends to be pretty active, and so that whole focus on the breath. I'm kind of constantly trying to
Recenter. Yeah.
refocus. But yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, I think I'm definitely bottom quartile in terms of effectiveness of meditation, but it's been helpful for me.
Yeah. Same.
Helps to manage stress and focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've noticed that it's a positive thing for me. I actually was just this week in a conversation with a couple coworkers who are bigger into meditation than I had realized. And sort of what brought the conversation up is that we were together for a work event, and one of my coworkers said, "Oh, I was at a meditation event for 2 days before I came here." And that sort of triggered the conversation. And I learned a little bit more about meditation just from having those conversations. I learned that some people actually involve physical movement in their meditation,
Hmm,
sort of, I guess, on a Tai Chi type level. And so for me,
interesting.
meditation has mostly been silence, focus, breathing focus. So I'm
Yeah.
interested in learning a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I've never tried it. I'm curious.
I've always either sat up or sat in a, you know, half laying, half sitting up position, or sat on the floor or sat on a chair. It's always,
For sure.
I never even tried standing to meditate. I didn't even consider that. So something I'm going to look into.
Good, good. Well, I'll be curious to
Yeah.
see what you learn.
Well, great, great. Yeah, this is great. This is really cool. I want to transition over, be mindful of your time of, we're starting to move along a little bit here. I want to transition over to the final segment where I ask the same three questions of every guest. And so for you, Chris, what is your definition of success?
I was listening to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, and Warren Buffett, I think somebody asked him the question, and he said, "Hey, how do you write your eulogy and live according to that?" And um, as you think about the activities that you're undertaking, how are they consistent with what you want people to say about you? And I would love, hey, at the end of my life, to be able to look back and say, you helped a lot of people and you made a difference in people's lives. And I do think that's changed from when I was younger. I think I was a lot more competitive as a young, certainly starting my career, thought a lot more about money than probably was healthy. Thought a lot more about career advancement than probably was healthy. And so I think one of the things that I've learned in terms of building our business and the 35 or 40 people that we have working with us is just how gratifying it is to watch others develop and hopefully have a small impact in terms of what they can do for their families and in turn, hey, what are we doing for those entrepreneurs and what are they doing for their families and their communities? It's been, I think I've gotten a lot more pleasure out of watching other people succeed based on help, hopefully that I've been able to give them than certainly any success that I've had personally, which is, I hope that I can look back on life and say I was really successful at helping others.
That's so powerful, very powerful. I love that answer. Question number two, for someone who is newer to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, could you give a good book recommendation?
So I'm going to draw again on somebody from Berkshire. It's not Warren Buffett, but Charlie Munger, who's his business partner. If you haven't gone onto YouTube and watched some Charlie Munger videos, you owe it to yourself to go do that. But there was a book that he didn't write. it, but it was a collection of his talks and some of his philosophies. It's called Poor Charlie's Almanac. I don't know that it's still in print. I think you can get it on Amazon, but it might be out of print, so it might be a little expensive. But I've given that book to all three of my kids, and mostly just because there are unbelievable life lessons in there. He is such a smart, wise person. I think he's almost 100 now, and still sharp as a tack. And I've read that book probably 3 or 4 times, and every read it, I learn something new, or I get some other nugget of advice. So, and yes, it's about investing, but it's much more about life, which is pretty cool.
Well, I really appreciate that one. I have not heard of that, and now I'm excited to check it out. I'm going to add it to my list right away.
It's really good. You'll enjoy it. When you're, I gave it to all my kids, I think when they turned 16 or 18, and said, "Hey, this is good life advice."
I asked that question semi-selfishly because sometimes I get great book recommendations, but I also love to be able to pass those on, and I don't always remember them. So I feel like this is a great way for me to learn things and pass it on to other people at the same time. So that was a really good value.
Awesome.
So before we move on to the final question, I want to again thank you for coming on. This has really been fun. I appreciate your value and your input and everything you're doing for entrepreneurs. How could we support you, and how could people reach out to you?
Certainly reach out to us. I'm on LinkedIn. And then you can certainly email me if that makes sense, Chris@class6partners.com. And, always happy to be helpful if we can, and really enjoyed the time with you, Bob.
All right, great. So final question. If you could think back with me to a young Chris around ages, 10 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far in your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to young Chris or to any preteen child to help guide them towards success?
That's a good question. I probably the first one is, you don't really need to be that serious. I think I was like I said, pretty competitive kid, and certainly competitive at the early start of my career. And I think it's probably healthy advice just to be a little bit more relaxed. Obviously, I think it served me well at that time, but I also would look back and say, you probably took some years off my life by being that competitive and that serious. I also the other piece that I would in my family, we would always have debates at dinner, right? There was, whether it was political or something else, there was lots of debates. And I think one of the things that I've learned, certainly being married, is that there's a significant price to being right. And sometimes it's not worth it. I think oftentimes we get caught up in trying to win our point or be right, certainly at the expense of other things, which are probably more important, whether that's marital harmony or, just having great relationships with people. So that was a significant one. And the last one will be very unique to me, which is, when your buddy says, "Let's go buy some eggs and throw them at the cars, racing past on Bright Road," which is where I grew up in Findlay, Ohio. Don't go.
Well, I think there's a good lesson there.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a good lesson in there about who you surround yourself with, right?
Yeah,
and choosing
for sure.
to spend your time with.
Yeah.
I like that. I don't think there's anyone so far who has taken it that literal to say, I want to tell myself specifically not to do this one thing. So
yeah. No, that was not something to be proud of.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on. For everyone who's listening, make sure you check him out. Chris Young from Class 6 Partners. The 6 is VI, and make sure you check him out. If you've gotten value out of this, make sure to give us a positive review and a like, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.